The blade of the shovel struck something that was not root nor stone, and Isaac Sutton felt the shock of it travel up through his palms just as the night split open with the thunder of hooves. He did not have time to pull the buried thing free before the fence at the edge of his orchard exploded inward in a spray of splintered rail, and a warhorse the color of wet slate came through the gap with an orc woman on its back, spear leveled and eyes burning gold in the lantern light. Isaac dropped the shovel and threw both hands wide, more out of animal instinct than any hope that it would save him, because the spearpoint was already an arm's length from his throat and closing. "Do not move," the orc woman said, in a voice that carried the flat, terrible calm of someone who had killed before and would not hesitate to do it again. "Do not so much as breathe wrong, human, or I will open you from chin to navel and feed what is left to the crows." Isaac held very still. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders from years of swinging a sword and then years of swinging an axe, but she was bigger, and the horse under her was trained for war, not plowing, and the spear in her hands was not for show. Her skin was a deep, mossy green-gray that seemed to drink the lantern light instead of reflecting it, and two small white tusks curved up from her lower lip, delicate compared to what he had seen on orc soldiers in the war, but no less real. Her hair was black and thick, braided close to her skull, and threaded through with small bone beads that clicked faintly when she moved. She wore fitted leather armor. A sleeveless cuirass lay snug over a dark underlayer that showed the hard, corded strength of her arms, and leather trousers tucked into tall riding boots, all of it worn and scarred from use, all of it fitting her like a second skin. She was, in the single terrified heartbeat he allowed himself to notice such things, one of the most striking women he had ever seen in his life, and she was about to kill him over a hole in the ground. "I found something," he said carefully, keeping his hands raised, keeping his voice low, and even the way he had learned to keep it during the war when panic got men killed faster than swords did. "In my own field. I do not know what it is. I have not touched it beyond digging it up." Liar. The spear point pressed closer, cold against the hollow of his throat. "You dig at midnight for a thing that is not yours to dig for. Only a thief works by moonlight." "I work by moonlight because I could not sleep," Isaac said. "I have been unable to sleep in this field for 4 nights ever since I buried a man in it." That got her attention. The spear did not move, but something shifted behind her eyes, a flicker of calculation instead of pure fury. "What man?" "I do not know his name. He came through my fence line half dead, an arrow in his side, some 10 days back. He would not let me fetch a healer from Windmill. He kept saying someone was coming for him, that he had to hide something, that he had to hide it deep. I gave him water and a blanket, and he died before dawn with his hands still buried in the dirt of my furrow. I buried him proper, said what words I knew how to say over a stranger, and I did not think on the dirt again until tonight, when I decided to dig a new irrigation channel through that same furrow and my shovel struck iron where there should have been nothing but soil." The orc woman studied him for a long moment, gold eyes moving over his face, his hands, the shovel lying discarded at his feet, the mound of freshly turned earth, and the corner of something wrapped in oiled hide just visible within it. Behind her, more shapes resolved out of the dark, 2 more riders reining in at the broken fence line, orcs in lighter scouting leathers, bows across their backs, watching the exchange with the tense readiness of soldiers waiting for a signal. "Show me," she said finally, "what you dug up, slowly. If your hand moves toward a weapon instead, I will not wait to see which it is." Isaac lowered himself to one knee, moving with deliberate slowness, and brushed the loose soil away from the bundle. The hide wrapping had rotted at the edges from 10 days in wet earth, and where it fell away he saw the pale curve of carved bone, old ivory yellowed with age and etched all along its length with symbols he did not know but recognized as orcish, deep and old and reverent, the kind of carving a smith did not rush. The orc woman made a sound low in her throat, something between a gasp and a growl, and swung down off her horse in one fluid motion that put her directly between Isaac and the buried thing, spear still in hand but no longer pointed at his chest. The ashen horn, she breathed, and for the first time there was something other than fury in her voice. There was relief so raw it cracked the edges of her words. By the old stones, it is real, it is here. That is what it is called, Isaac asked, still on one knee, not moving. It is the horn of my grandfather's grandfather, carved from the tusk of the first Strongtusk chieftain, and it has been missing from my clan's war camp for 11 days. She crouched, and up close Isaac could see the exhaustion under her fierceness, the dark smudges beneath her eyes, the way her hands trembled very slightly as they hovered over the horn without yet touching it, as though she feared it might vanish if she moved too fast. 11 days I have ridden this plateau searching, while my clan's honor bleeds out with every hour it is gone, and I find it buried in a human orchard by a man who claims a dying stranger put it there. I am not lying to you, Isaac said. She looked up at him, and something in her gaze sharpened, assessing him the way a soldier assesses another soldier, looking for the tell that would mark him a liar. Whatever she found or did not find made the spear in her hand finally lower fully to her side. No, she said slowly, I do not think you are, which means the man who stole this from my people and the man who died in your field are the same, or close enough to it that it hardly matters. She rose, and even crouched Isaac had felt small before her, but standing she seemed to fill the whole night. My name is Glasha Strongtusk, daughter of Glasha Strongtusk, who led our clan until the fever took him this past winter. I am the one who must return this horn to my people whole and untouched before the next full moon, when the clan gathers to name a new chieftain, or I forfeit my claim to lead them, and worse, I hand my rival's cause to say humans stole from us and started a war neither side can afford. Isaac rose slowly to his feet, brushing dirt from his knees. Isaac Sutton, he said, I have an orchard here and grain besides. I was a sellsword before that, some years back, along the border wars, though I have not held a blade in anger since I hung mine over my hearth and bought this land instead. Something in the way he said it made her look at him again, longer this time, taking in the calluses on his hands that came from an axe handle now, but had once come from a sword grip, the old scar that curved along his jaw, the stillness in him that had let him keep his head while a spear was at his throat. A sellsword who tends apple trees, she said, and there was the faintest curl at the corner of her mouth, not quite a smile but close to one. That is a strange thing to become. I got tired of the killing, Isaac said simply. Trees do not fight back. Glasha Strongtusk studied him a moment longer, then crouched again beside the horn and began, with careful, reverent hands, to lift it free of the earth. The two orcs at the fence line dismounted and came forward, and in the lantern light Isaac saw one of them was older, gray-streaked at the temples, watching him with open suspicion, and the other was young, barely more than a boy by orc reckoning, staring at the horn with something like awe. We should bind him, the older orc said in the common tongue, jerking his chin toward Isaac. Bring him before the clan. Let the elders decide if he speaks true. No, Glasha said, without looking up from the horn cradled now against her chest. He did not steal it. He buried a dying man with his own hands and lost sleep over it. That is not the mark of a thief. She rose, horn held carefully in the crook of one arm, and fixed Isaac with a look that was measuring in a different way now, less soldier assessing danger and more something else entirely, something that made Isaac's chest feel strange and tight. But the man who stole it did not act alone, and I do not believe he is the last of his kind sniffing around this plateau. If there are more of them, they will come looking for what they lost, and they will come looking on your land, Isaac Sutton, because this is where their comrade fell. Then I suppose we have a problem in common, Isaac said. Glasha's tusks caught the lantern light as her mouth curved, this time fully, into something that was almost a grin. I suppose we do. The town of Windmill Crossing sat where the wagon trail met the base of the plateau, a cluster of stone and timber buildings, ringed by a low wall more suited to keeping out wolves than armies. Its market square dominated by a well and a whipping post that had not been used in years, but which no one had bothered to tear down. Isaac had not planned to bring an orc woman into it, but Glasha had insisted on riding down with him the next morning to question the garrison captain about any strangers who had passed through in the last fortnight, and Isaac had not found a way to talk her out of it that did not sound like cowardice. The reaction was immediate and ugly. A woman at a vegetable stall snatched her child back and hissed something under her breath. Two men loading a wagon stopped and stared, hands drifting toward the axes propped against their cart. By the time Isaac and Glasha had crossed half the square, a small crowd had gathered at a wary distance, muttering, and one voice, thick with drink even at mid-morning, called out loud enough to carry. "We do not want her kind here. Orcs raided my brother's farm not 2 summers back, burned it to the ground." Glasha's spine went rigid, but she did not slow her pace, did not so much as turn her head, though Isaac saw the muscle work in her jaw and the way her hand drifted, casual as anything, to rest near the hilt of the long knife at her belt. "That was a different clan," Isaac said, loud enough for the crowd to hear, stepping half a pace closer to Glasha's side as they walked. "And she is here on business with the garrison, same as any traveler with coin to spend and a grievance to settle. Go back to your stalls." "Easy for you to say, orchard man," the drunk called back, pushing away from the post he leaned on, swaying toward them with the particular boldness of a man who had found courage in a bottle. "You did not lose kin to green skins. Maybe you would sing a different tune if you had." He was close now, close enough that Isaac could smell the sour ale on him, and close enough to see the man's hand close around a fallen fence post, hefting it like a club. Isaac stepped fully between him and Glasha before he had decided to, his body moving on old instinct, and put a hand flat against the man's chest, not shoving, just stopping him cold. "That is enough," Isaac said, low and level. "You will not raise a hand to her while I am standing here. Go home and sleep it off." For a moment it looked like the man might swing anyway, drink brave and humiliated in front of the gathering crowd, but something in Isaac's stillness, the same stillness that had once made hardened mercenaries think twice before crossing him, seemed to reach through the fog of ale, and the man lowered the post and spat at Isaac's boots instead, then shuffled off muttering. Glasha had not moved a single step back the entire time, had not flinched or reached fully for her knife, but when Isaac turned to look at her, he found her watching him with an expression he could not immediately name, something startled and considering all at once. "You did not need to do that," she said quietly, once they had put the square behind them and were climbing the garrison steps. "I have faced worse than a drunk with a fence post." "I know you have," Isaac said. "I did it anyway." "Why?" He thought about it honestly before answering, because she deserved an honest answer and not a soft one. Because it was the right thing to do, and because nobody should stand alone against a crowd like that if there is someone willing to stand beside them. He glanced sideways at her. "You looked like you were used to standing alone." Something shifted in Glasha's face then, quick and unguarded before she smoothed it away, but Isaac had seen it, and it stayed with him the rest of the day like a coal banked low in a hearth. The garrison captain, a tired man named Relic with more gray in his beard than Isaac remembered from years back, confirmed what they already feared. A band of deserters and outlaws, 6 or 7 strong, led by a man Relic named with obvious distaste as Corwin Vale, had been raiding trade caravans along the plateau road for the better part of a month, and had struck an orc supply train 11 nights past, the same night the Ashen Horn went missing. Relic had sent no patrol after them, not for lack of will, but for lack of men. The garrison stretched thin, covering 3 villages with a company meant for 1. "Vale," Isaac repeated, and something cold moved through him at the name. "You know him," Glasha said, watching his face. "I fought beside him once, years back, before he was thrown out of the company for what he did to a captured scout. He was always the kind of man who thought loyalty was a debt to be spent rather than a thing to be kept." Isaac rubbed a hand over his jaw. "If it is truly Vale who has your horn, or who has traded it along, he will not give it back for honor's sake. He will want to be paid, or he will want to sell it to whoever offers more, and I would not put it past him to sell it twice over to spite everyone involved. Then we find him before he can sell anything, Glasha said, and I take back what is mine. They rode out from Windmere that same afternoon, climbing the wagon trail up onto the high golden shoulder of the plateau proper, where the grain stood chest-high and rippled gold-green under a wind that never seemed to fully stop, and where the old windmills stood scattered across the horizon like watchful giants, sails turning lazily, grinding whatever grain the local farms brought to them. Isaac's own land lay near the plateau's eastern edge, his orchard rose climbing a gentle slope toward a windmill he had spent 2 winters restoring with his own hands. The Sentinel, he called it, half for the way it stood watch over his fields and half because the old miller who sold him the land had called it that before him. They made camp that first night in the lee of a smaller, ruined mill whose sails had long since rotted away, sharing a fire and a pot of Isaac's traveling stew. And it was there, with the firelight painting gold across Glasha's green-gray skin and picking out the small white curve of her tusks, that Isaac made the mistake that taught him something he would carry the rest of his life. He had been curious. That was all, curious the way a man is curious about a thing he has never seen up close. And when Glasha bent to check the fire, he reached out without thinking and brushed his fingers briefly along the curve of one tusk, marveling at the smoothness of it, the strange living ivory warmth of something that was bone and yet clearly felt. Glasha's head snapped around, and for one terrible instant her lips peeled back from her teeth in a reflexive snarl, tusks bared fully, eyes flaring gold and furious, and Isaac found himself flinching backward so hard he nearly toppled into the fire. Then just as fast she caught herself, the snarl fading, her shoulders dropping, and something like shame crossed her face. "Forgive me," she said low. "I did not mean to frighten you. It is instinct when something touches my face without warning. Among my people a bite is not a small thing. We do not nip and play the way some creatures do. When an orc bares her teeth when she bites, it means she is angry enough to draw blood and nothing less." Isaac's heart was still hammering, but he made himself sit back down slowly instead of edging further away, because he did not want her to think he was afraid of her, even though for one flashing second he had been. "I should not have touched you without asking," he said. "That was foolish of me." "It was," Glasha agreed, but there was no anger in it now, only a rueful sort of honesty. "My kind bite only in anger, Isaac Sutton. It is not a thing we do carelessly, and it is not a thing meant to be gentle. Be glad I caught myself before instinct won." He looked at her for a long moment across the fire, at the tension still lingering in the set of her jaw, and something about the way she said it, the flatness of it, the certainty that biting could only ever be one thing, stayed lodged in his mind like a splinter he could not stop worrying at. "What if it was not anger?" he asked slowly. "What would it look like then?" Glasha blinked at him, clearly not expecting the question. "There is no then, it is what it is." "Everything has more than one face," Isaac said. "Even a blade can be a tool or a weapon depending on the hand that holds it and the reason it is drawn. I have used a sword to kill men, and I have used the very same sword to cut bread and mend fences after I gave up killing. The blade did not change, only the reason did." He held her gaze, feeling foolish and earnest all at once. "I am only asking whether the same might be true of a bite." For a long moment Glasha said nothing at all, only watched him with an unreadable expression, firelight flickering gold in her eyes. And then she looked away, out into the dark grain fields, and did not answer, and Isaac did not press her. Though the question sat between them the rest of that night like a live coal, neither of them dared touch again just yet. They found the old windmill 3 days later, a squat abandoned structure on the plateau's northern edge, whose sails had been stripped for firewood by whoever now called it home, smoke curling faintly from a hole punched in its stone roof. Glasha had tracked the outlaw's trail with a patience and skill that left Isaac quietly impressed, reading broken grain stalks and horse droppings, and the ash of cold campfires the way another man might read a printed page. And when they finally crouched together in the tall grass overlooking the mill, 6 horses tethered outside told them they had found Corwin Vale's band at last. "We should watch first," Isaac murmured. "Learn their numbers, their habits, before we move." "We do not have time to watch for long," Glasha said, but she settled beside him in the grass anyway, closer than was strictly necessary, her shoulder a warm line against his own. "The moon grows fuller every night we wait." They watched through the afternoon, and Isaac counted 6 men coming and going from the mill, rough and armed, laughing too loud the way men did when they thought no one watched them, and near dusk a 7th man emerged, taller than the rest, moving with the loose, arrogant swagger Isaac remembered all too well from years back. "That is him," Isaac said quietly. "Corwin Vale." They waited until full dark, until the fire inside the mill had burned low and most of the outlaws had settled to sleep, before Glasha moved. She went low and silent through the grain, a blade in each hand, and Isaac followed with his own recovered sword, the one that had hung dusty over his hearth for 3 years, feeling the old familiar weight of it settle into his grip like a memory he had not asked to relive. It did not go entirely as planned. A dog they had not accounted for woke and barked, and then it was chaos, men scrambling up from their bedrolls, steel ringing against steel in the dark, and Isaac found himself trading blows with a wiry outlaw half his age, while Glasha moved through the melee like something out of an old war song, fast and brutal and utterly without hesitation, dropping 2 men before Isaac had finished with one. Corwin Vale came at Isaac himself in the end, recognizing him even in the dark, calling his name with something between delight and disbelief. "Sutton, by the old gods, they told me you'd gone soft, gone to grow apples like some old woman." "I did," Isaac said, parrying a wild swing and stepping into the follow-through the way he had been taught a decade ago. "But I still remember how to do this." He disarmed Vale in 4 moves, old muscle memory carrying him through where raw strength alone might have failed, and put the point of his sword to the man's throat while Glasha finished dealing with the last of the others, standing over the outlaw's fallen leader with her chest heaving and blood on her knuckles that was not her own. Corwin Vale, on his knees in the dirt with a sword at his throat, laughed anyway, breathless and ugly. "You want the horn. I do not have it anymore. My man Dresk had it when he ran from your green-skinned friends, and he never made it back. I have been trying to find where he fell for a week." "He fell in my field," Isaac said, "and I already have what he was carrying. I am not here for the horn. I am here to make certain you do not come looking for it, or for me, or for her, ever again." "There is a rival clan sniffing around too," Vale said, some ugly cunning surfacing through his fear now, clearly grasping for anything that might buy him his life. "Ashfang. Their war leader, Gorek, paid one of my men good silver for word of where the horn went. Said if the Strongtusks could not hold their own sacred relic safe, they did not deserve to hold the clan either. He means to use its loss against her." He jerked his chin toward Glasha. "You should worry less about me and more about him, Orchard Man. I am done here. I have no fight left in me." Glasha's expression darkened at the name Gorek Ashfang, and Isaac saw the worry settle into the line of her shoulders even as she kept her blade steady. They did not kill Corwin Vale, though Isaac would not have blamed Glasha if she had. Instead, they bound the outlaws and left word with a passing trade caravan to alert the Windmill garrison of where to find them, and rode on through the night toward Isaac's orchard, both of them silent with the weight of what Vale had said hanging between them. Gorek Ashfang arrived at the base of the plateau 3 days later, and he did not come quietly. Isaac heard the horn before he saw the riders, a deep brass note that rolled across the grain like the plateau itself was groaning, and by the time he reached the edge of his own fields he could see them, a column of orc warriors on heavy horses, perhaps 30 strong, banners of black and rust snapping in the wind, cresting the rise where the wagon trail met his land. At their head rode a massive orc, easily a head taller than any of his kin, tusks thick and yellowed and filed to points, a warhammer slung across his back that looked heavy enough to fell a windmill. Glasha went rigid beside Isaac at the sight of him, her hand tightening on the hilt of her sword. "Gorek," she said, low. The warband halted at a respectful but pointed distance, and Gorek Ashfang rode forward alone, reining in his horse close enough that its breath steamed in the cool morning air between them. "Glasha Strongtusk," he said, and his voice was a low rumble that carried easily over the wind. "I heard you found what your clan lost. I heard, too, that you found it buried on human land, dug up by human hands, and that you have spent the days since running about the countryside with a human sellsword at your heel like a pet." "I found the horn because I did not stop looking for it," Glasha said, her voice hard. "Which is more than can be said for your warriors, who I hear have spent these same days drinking and boasting about a war that has not yet come." Gorek's small eyes flicked to Isaac, dismissive, then back to Glasha. "The moot is in 9 days. When the clan gathers, they will ask who is fit to lead us, and I will stand before them and say that a chieftain who lets our most sacred relic fall into human hands, who must be saved by human charity, is no chieftain at all. I will say the Strongtusk line has grown weak, cozying up to the same people who have burned our villages and salted our fields for 2 generations. And I will say that I, at least, have never needed a human's help to hold what is mine." He straightened in the saddle. "Bring the horn to the moot yourself if you dare show your face there beside him, or hand it to me now, and I will carry it home with the honor it deserves, and perhaps I will remember mercy when I speak of you before the elders." "I will bring it myself," Glasha said, "and I will stand before the clan as my father's daughter, and you will not take from me what is not yours to take." Gorek studied her a long moment, then looked once more, slowly, deliberately, at Isaac, at the sword on his hip, and the orchard rose behind him and the windmill turning lazily on the hill. "9 days, Strongtusk," he said. "If you are not there, or if the horn is not with you, I will assume the worst, and I will come take back what your weakness has put at risk. And if I find your human still hovering about you like a stray dog, I will not be gentle in removing him." He wheeled his horse and rode back to his warband without another word, and the whole column turned and thundered away down the wagon trail, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the hoofbeats had been. "He will come regardless," Glasha said quietly, watching them go. "Whether I am at the moot or not, whether the horn is with me or not. He wants war with your kind, Isaac, because war lets a man like him seize power that peace never would. The horn is only his excuse." "Then we do not give him the excuse," Isaac said. "We get you to that moot hole with the horn, and we let your clan see for themselves who searched 11 days and nights to bring it home, and who spent those same days drinking and plotting instead." Glasha turned to look at him, and there was something raw in her expression now, something she had kept locked away since the night at the fire. "Why do you keep doing this?" she said. "Standing between me and danger, riding into a fight that is not yours. My clan is not your clan. My war is not your war." "Maybe it is not," Isaac admitted. "But you are standing in my orchard, and I would rather fight beside you than watch you walk into that moot alone and outnumbered by men who want you to fail." He hesitated, then said the rest of it before he lost his nerve. "And maybe it is more than that. Maybe I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the night you nearly took my head off with a spear, and I do not know what to call that. But I know I do not want you to face Gorek Ashfang without me standing at your side." Glasha was quiet for a long moment, the wind moving the grain around them in long golden waves, the windmill sails turning slow and steady on the rise behind him. Then she stepped closer, close enough that Isaac could feel the warmth radiating off her, close enough that he had to tilt his head back slightly to hold her gaze. "No human has ever spoken to me that way," she said low. "Most fear me, some hate me. None have ever looked at me the way you are looking at me now." "How am I looking at you?" Isaac asked, though his voice had gone rough. "Like I am something to be treasured instead of something to be survived." She lifted a hand and laid it against his chest, over the steady drum of his heart, and Isaac had the dizzying sense that she could feel exactly how hard it was beating. You asked me once what a bite would look like if it were not born of anger. I did not answer you then because I did not know. I have never had reason to find out. Do you have a reason now? Isaac asked, hardly daring to breathe. Glasha's gold eyes searched his face, and whatever she found there made the last of her guardedness fall away. I think I might, she said, and closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was not gentle, not at first. There was too much of her in it for gentleness. The same fierce certainty that had put a spear to his throat the night they met now poured into the press of her mouth against his. But Isaac met it without flinching, one hand coming up to cradle the back of her neck. And when she finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, foreheads nearly touching. That, Glasha said, a little unsteady, is not what I meant to show you. I did not mind it, Isaac said, and felt her tusks brush warm against his cheek as she laughed, low and real, a sound he had not heard from her before, and one he decided immediately he wanted to hear again. They rode toward Strongtusk lands 3 days later, taking the long way to avoid Ashfang patrols, and it was on the second night of that journey, camped in a hollow beneath a bluff where the wind could not reach them, that Isaac finally got the answer to the question that had sat between them since that first uneasy night by the fire. They had eaten and banked the fire low, and Glasha had been quiet for a long while, watching him across the flickering light with an expression he was starting to recognize, something considering and warm all at once. "Come here," she said finally. Isaac moved around the fire and sat beside her close, their shoulders touching, and she turned toward him, lifting one hand to trace the line of his jaw, slow and deliberate, the way he had once foolishly reached for her tusk without asking. This time, when her fingers brushed close to his mouth, he did not flinch. "You asked me a question once," she said quietly. "What a bite would look like if it were not anger. I have thought about it since. I did not know the answer then. I believe I do now." "Show me," Isaac said, and his voice came out rougher than he meant it to. Glasha's gold eyes held his for a long moment, searching, and whatever she saw there settled something in her, some last hesitation easing away. She lifted his hand from where it rested at his side and brought it up, turned it palm upward, and pressed her mouth to the base of his thumb, at the soft rise of muscle there, and closed her teeth over it, slow and careful and shockingly gentle, no more than a firm press, a warmth, a claiming pressure that sent a shiver straight up through Isaac's arm and settled low in his chest. It was nothing at all like anger. It was deliberate and tender, and it lingered a moment longer than it needed to before she released him, pressing a soft kiss to the same spot as though to soothe a hurt that had never actually come. "That," she murmured, "is what it looks like when it is not anger, Isaac Sutton. Among my people that is not a small thing either. A bite given like that freely, gently, is a claiming. It says this one is mine, and I am content to be gentle with what is mine." She looked up at him, something vulnerable moving behind the fierceness now. "I have never given that to anyone before." Isaac's throat felt tight. "I do not take that lightly," he said. "Good," Glasha said. "Because I do not give it lightly." She leaned in, and this time when she kissed him it was slower, deeper, and Isaac gathered her against him, feeling the solid, powerful warmth of her settle into his arms as though she had always belonged there. And for a long while neither of them spoke at all, content instead to simply exist together in the low firelight, the question that had haunted them both finally, gently, answered. They reached the moot grounds on the 8th day, a wide, flattened bowl of land ringed by standing stones older than either of their people's memory, where clan tents already dotted the grass in a great circle, and cookfires sent smoke curling into the evening sky. Glasha rode in with the ashen horn wrapped in fresh cloth and cradled openly across her saddle, and Isaac rode at her side, and the murmur that went through the gathered clan at the sight of them, orc and human riding in together, was immediate and loud. Word spread fast that the missing horn had been found, and faster still that it had been a human who found it, and a human who had ridden at Glasha Strongtusk's sighed to recover it from raiders who meant to sell it or use it to spark a war. By the time she dismounted before the elders' fire, the entire moot had gathered to watch, and among them, unmistakable at the front of the crowd, stood Gorik Ashfang, his face like a thundercloud. Glasha knelt and laid the ashen horn before the eldest of the clan elders, a stooped, ancient orc woman named Vesa who had known Glasha since she was small, and told the whole of it plainly, without embellishment, the theft, the search, the human orchard where she found it, the outlaws they had fought together to make certain no one would come hunting it again. And this human, Vesa said, fixing Isaac with a long, unreadable look, rode with you into that fight of his own will, knowing it was not his to fight. He did, Glasha said, and he stood between me and a mob in his own town when they turned on me for simply walking beside him. He has asked nothing of my clan or of me, and he has given more to protect what is ours than any warrior standing in this circle who spent those same 11 nights drinking instead of searching. Her eyes cut, deliberately, toward Gorik Ashfang as she said it, and a ripple of low muttering went through the gathered clan. Gorik stepped forward, jaw tight. Pretty words for a woman who wishes to excuse her own weakness by draping it in a human's courage. The horn was still lost under her watch. That failure does not vanish because she found a stray dog willing to help her hunt for it. Careful, Gorik, Vesa said, her voice suddenly sharp as a blade despite her age. I have sat this council fire longer than you have drawn breath, and I have never once heard a chieftain candidate speak so poorly of another's ally in open moot. It speaks more of your own fear than of her failure. It was into that charged, uncertain silence that the horns began to sound from the ridge above the bowl, 3 long blasts, the sound every clan on the plateau knew meant riders approaching in force, and not their own. The scouts came pounding down into the firelight moments later with word that turned the entire gathering to ice. A second warband, unmarked, unclaimed but bristling with weapons and moving fast, had been spotted circling toward the moot grounds from the north, and among the tracks the scouts had followed back unmistakable were the boot prints of men, human men, moving in careful step alongside orc riders. Corwin Vale, Isaac breathed, understanding hitting him like a fist to the gut. He did not just sell word of the horns lost to Ashfang. He must have sold something else, or promised something else, to whoever else was willing to pay for chaos. He wants this moot to end in blood, human and orc together, because a war on this plateau makes every stolen wagon and every burned farm easy coin for a man like him. There is no time to organize a full defense here, Glasha said, already moving, already thinking like the war leader her clan had raised her to be. The moot grounds are open, undefended, half the clan armed only for ceremony. If that warband hits us here in the open in the dark, it will be a slaughter no matter which side we are on. The windmill, Isaac said suddenly. My orchard is 2 hours hard ride from here, up on the plateau's shoulder. The sentinel mill is stone, 3 stories, narrow approaches through the orchard rows that will bottleneck any cavalry charge to almost nothing. If we can draw them there instead of fighting them here in the open, we buy ourselves walls and choke points instead of open grass. Vesa's ancient eyes moved between them, weighing the plan in an instant. Go, she said. Take who will follow you. I will hold the moot grounds and send every rider I can spare after the unmarked warband's flank once they commit. But Glasha Strongtusk, if you lead men into that fight and it is a trap, if this is some scheme of Ashfang's own making to discredit you further, know that your claim to lead this clan may not survive it. Then let it not survive it, Glasha said. I would rather lose a chieftain's seat than lose the people I am meant to protect. They rode hard through the dark, Glasha, Isaac, a dozen Strongtusk warriors who trusted her enough to follow without question. And to everyone's surprise, Gorik Ashfang himself at the head of his own war band, his pride evidently unwilling to let a rival clan take a stand he was not part of, whatever his feelings about who led it. They reached the orchard as the first gray edge of dawn touched the horizon, and Isaac had barely time to throw open the gates and rouse his handful of farmhands before the enemy warband crested the rise behind them, easily 50 riders strong, orc and human mercenary alike. And among them, unmistakable even at a distance, Corwin Vale himself, apparently having found new employers willing to pay for exactly the chaos he specialized in. What followed was, Isaac would later think, the longest morning of his entire life. They fought from the orchard rows first, using the narrow gaps between trees to break the enemy cavalry's charge into ragged, disorganized clusters that Glasha's warriors picked apart with spear and axe, while Isaac, sword in hand for the second time in a week after 3 years of rust, found himself back in the grim, familiar rhythm of close combat, parry and strike, step and pivot, protecting a line of farmhands who had never held a weapon meant for more than scaring off crows. Arrows hissed through the branches. A haystack caught fire from a stray torch and sent black smoke rolling across the field. Twice Isaac saw Glasha in the thick of the worst of it, moving like something out of legend, and twice his heart nearly stopped watching her take blows meant to kill lesser warriors and simply refuse to fall. They were pushed back, row by row, toward the Sentinel Mill itself as the enemy's numbers began to tell, and it was there, with the stone tower at their backs and the last defensible ground beneath their feet, that the fight turned truly desperate. Isaac's farmhands barricaded the mill's lower door with grain sacks and furniture while the warriors held the courtyard, and for a stretch of time that felt endless, it seemed entirely possible that none of them would see the sun fully rise. Corwin Vale himself came at Isaac again in the chaos, grinning through a bloodied lip, clearly relishing this second chance at the man who had bested him once already. "Should have killed me when you had the chance, Sutton," he snarled, swinging hard. "Now you get to watch everything you built here burn before you die in it." Isaac fought him with everything 3 years of rust could not entirely dull, but Vale was faster now, more desperate, fighting like a man with nothing left to lose, and a lucky strike sent Isaac's sword spinning from his grip and put him flat on his back with Vale's blade descending toward his chest. It never landed. Glasha crossed the entire courtyard in a handful of strides and drove her own blade into Vale's side with such force it lifted him briefly off his feet. And as he fell, gasping, she stood over Isaac, chest heaving, blood streaking her arm from a wound he had not even seen her take. And for one suspended moment their eyes met, and something passed between them too large and too raw for words. But the moment shattered almost instantly, because behind Glasha, unseen by her, one of Vale's mercenary archers had already loosed an arrow, and it was flying true for her unprotected back. Isaac did not think. He simply moved, throwing himself upward and sideways, close enough to shove Glasha off balance and take the arrow's path across his own shoulder instead of her spine. It struck him high, near the collarbone, and the impact spun him half around and dropped him hard against the mill's stone wall, white pain blooming bright and immediate, but the shot that would have killed her buried itself instead in muscle that would heal. Glasha's roar of fury at the sight of him falling was, Isaac would swear later, loud enough to shake the mill's remaining sails, and what followed was less a battle than a slaughter of her own making, her grief and terror pouring out through blade and fist until the archer, and 2 more who came at her in the chaos after, lay broken in the courtyard dust. It was in that same chaos, with Isaac bleeding against the mill wall and Glasha standing over him like a wall of vengeance, that Goric Ashfang's warband finally crashed into the enemy's rear flank, having circled wide through the far orchard rows exactly as Isaac's plan had hoped, and the tide of the battle broke all at once, the unmarked mercenaries and outlaws scattering under the sudden crushing pressure of a second, fresh warband they had not accounted for. By the time the sun cleared the horizon fully, the fight was over, the enemy dead or fled, the orchard scorched in patches but standing, and the Sentinel Mill's stone walls holding firm above it all, sails turning slow and undamaged in the morning wind as though nothing at all had happened beneath them. Glasha knelt beside Isaac in the wreckage of the courtyard, hands pressed hard against the wound at his shoulder, her face streaked with blood and ash and something rower than either. "Do not you dare," she said, voice cracking. "Do not you dare take an arrow meant for me and then die on me anyway, Isaac Sutton. I did not survive 11 days of searching and a night of war only to lose you to one stray shaft. I am not planning on it," Isaac managed, though the world had gone gray and swimming at the edges. "Hurts worse than I remembered arrows hurting." "Fool," Glasha said, and there were tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on her face even as she pressed a torn strip of cloth hard against his wound. "Beautiful, stubborn fool." He did not fully lose consciousness, though the next stretch of time came to him in fragments, being carried into the mill's lower room, Glasha's voice sharp and commanding as she directed the farmhands to fetch water and clean cloth, the burn of something strong being poured into the wound, her hand never once leaving his even as she barked orders, her thumb tracing small, unconscious circles against his knuckles the entire time, as though the contact alone kept her steady. Gorik Ashfang found them there some while later, standing in the doorway of the mill's lower room with his warhammer still slung across his back, and a look on his broad face that Isaac, still hazy with blood loss, could not quite read. "You held this ground against 50 riders with farmhands and a handful of warriors," Gorik said slowly, looking around at the barricaded door, the wounded being tended, Glasha's blood-streaked hands still pressed to a human's injury with a tenderness that seemed to genuinely confound him. "You did not run, Strongtusk. Neither did he." "No," Glasha said, not looking up from Isaac's shoulder. "We did not." Gorik was quiet a long moment, and then, gruffly, as though the words cost him something, he said, "I will not stand against your claim at the moot. Whatever quarrel I have with humans, I saw with my own eyes this morning who fought and who fled, and it was not the ones you rode in beside." He glanced once more at Isaac, something almost like respect in the look, and then turned and walked back out into the smoking ruin of the courtyard without waiting for a response. It was 3 days before Isaac was steady enough to travel, 3 days spent in the cool stone room of his own mill with Glasha rarely leaving his side, tending his wound with a mix of orc field medicine and whatever herbs his own small stores could provide. And it was on the second of those nights, with fever finally broken and pain dulled to a manageable ache, that she told him what the battle and everything before it had truly cost her. "I sent word to Vesa," she said quietly, sitting on the edge of his cot in the lamplight, her fingers laced loosely through his. "I told her I will not stand for chieftain at this moot." Isaac went very still. "Why?" "Because to lead my clan the way it must be led now, in whatever peace we manage to build with your kind after this, requires a chieftain who can live wholly among the clan, day and night, bound to its councils and its war camps and its endless duties." Her thumb moved slowly across his knuckles, the same unconscious gesture she had used all through the worst of his fever. "I do not wish to live only among the clan, Isaac Sutton. I wish to live here on this plateau beside a man who took an arrow meant for me without a single moment's hesitation. I cannot do both fully, and I have chosen which I want less to lose." "Glasha," Isaac said, throat tight, "you cannot give up your father's legacy for me. I will not let that be the cost of this." "You do not get to decide what I am willing to pay," she said, fierce even now, even exhausted and worn thin from days of nursing him. "I have spent my whole life being told what a chieftain's daughter must want, must do, must become. For the first time I have chosen something for myself freely with clear eyes, and it is you. That is not a sacrifice forced upon me. It is a gift I am giving, and I will not have you refuse it out of guilt." Her gold eyes held his, fierce and certain, even wet with unshed tears. "I lose a title. I gain a life I actually want to live. That is not a loss I regret." Isaac reached up with his good arm and drew her down, slowly, careful of his wound, until her forehead rested against his. "Then I will spend the rest of my life making certain you never once regret it," he said, "even if it takes me 50 more years of apple trees to prove it." The clan moot named Gorik Ashfang chieftain a week later, at Glasha's own recommendation, delivered before the full gathered council with her chin high and no trace of bitterness in her voice, only the steady conviction of a woman who had chosen her own path with open eyes. Gorik, for his part, surprised the entire gathering by publicly naming her Strongtusk clan's official envoy to the human border towns, a role with real standing and real voice in the clan's councils despite her no longer living among them full-time, an honor few had expected from a man who had ridden onto Isaac's land 9 days earlier threatening war. You held ground beside a human that most of my own warriors would have fled, Gorik told her plainly, before the assembled clan. I would be a poor chieftain indeed if I let pride cost my people a voice like yours simply because you have also chosen to keep your heart. Isaac stood at the edge of that gathering, still favoring his healing shoulder, and watched Glasha Strongtusk stand tall and unashamed before her own people, choosing openly and without apology the life she wanted, and felt something in his chest that he had not let himself feel fully in years, not since long before the war had taught him to guard against hoping for too much. They rode back to the orchard together 3 days after that, the Sentinel Mill's sails turning steady against a sky gone soft gold with early autumn. And it was there, in the courtyard where he had nearly died, and she had nearly lost everything protecting him, that Glasha turned to him with a small carved wooden box she had carried the whole way from the moot grounds and had not yet explained. Among my people, she said, opening it to reveal a slender braided cord of dark leather threaded through with small bone beads much like the ones in her own hair. When an orc chooses a mate freely, without clan arrangement, without expectation, she is called a bride of her own choosing, and there is a custom that marks it, one I have never once thought I would perform because I never thought I would find someone worth performing it for. Tell me, Isaac said, throat suddenly tight. It is the bite, Glasha said, quiet and sure. Not the one born of anger, the other one. Given freely before witnesses, it becomes a binding, a claim spoken in the body instead of only in words. It marks a man as chosen, truly chosen by an orc who could have had any warrior of her own kind and wanted instead only him. Isaac's breath caught. Do it, he said, without hesitation, without a shred of the fear that had once made him flinch from her tusks in firelight. Show me again what it looks like when it is not anger, Glasha. Mark me. I have never wanted anything the way I want to belong to you. Glasha's eyes shone, gold and fierce and unguarded, and she stepped close, cupping his jaw in both hands, and this time when her mouth found the joint of his neck and shoulder, just above where the arrow scar still marked his skin. The bite she gave him was slow and deliberate and gentle in a way that still somehow made his whole body ache with wanting, a claiming pressed into flesh instead of spoken into air, sealed a moment later with the soft press of her lips against the mark she had made. There, she murmured against his skin, her arms winding fully around him, solid and warm and entirely his. Now the whole world may know what my kind's bite looks like when it is not born of fury, but of love. Now they may know you are mine, Isaac Sutton, chosen freely, kept fiercely, for as long as I have breath to keep you. Isaac drew her tighter against him, feeling the mark she had left throb faintly, warm and claimed, feeling the whole weight of the last month, the fear and the fighting and the arrow and the fever, finally settle into something steady and certain and whole. The season turned gold to amber across the plateau in the weeks that followed, the windmill sails turning steady above rows of apple trees heavy with fruit, and word spread, slowly at first and then all at once, of the human orchard keeper and the orc envoy who had stood together against 50 riders and walked away with their lives and each other. Trade between Windmere and the Strongtusk clan opened cautiously in the wake of it, wagons of grain and cider traveling up the plateau road where once only fear had traveled, and though old prejudice did not vanish overnight, it began, slowly, to loosen its grip. One shared harvest, one honest handshake, one visible mark of devotion at a time. Isaac Sutton kept his orchard, and kept the sword that had saved Glasha's life hung once more over his hearth, not out of fear this time but out of pride, a reminder of a knight he had chosen to stand and not run. And Glasha Strongtusk, envoy without a throne, bride without a clan wedding, chose him every single morning after that, in the way she reached for him first thing upon waking, in the fierce, open way she looked at him across their shared table, in the mark upon his shoulder that never fully faded and that she pressed her lips to often, as though renewing the claim each time. They stood together on the Sentinel Mill's threshold one evening as the sun sank gold and heavy over the grain, her arm looped easily through his hand resting warm over the mark she had given him, and neither of them needed to say aloud that whatever they had lost along the way, a title, a simpler life, the safety of never having risked loving someone so fiercely, had been paid in full and gladly for exactly what they now stood holding. "No regrets," Isaac said quietly, echoing words she had once said to him in fever and fear. "None," Glasha Strongtusk agreed, tusks curving in a smile against the dying light, and pulled him close. And there, beneath the slow-turning sails of the mill he had built and she had helped him defend, they simply stayed,